A Black Executive Perspective.
Welcome to a Black Executive Perspective podcast, a safe space where we discuss all matters related to race, especially race in corporate America. I'm your host, Tony Tidbit, and I've climbed the corporate ladder for over 35 years, so I'm ready to sit down, break down these barriers, and make these uncomfortable conversations comfortable. So our mission here is to have these uncomfortable conversations, to have open and honest dialogue that's going to help from a learning standpoint, educational standpoint, with our goal and mission to help bring the races together and become one race, the human race.
That's right. And in each episode, we will sit down with compelling storytellers to hear their unique experiences, challenges, and triumphs on their pathway to success. In this episode, you will learn more about the hosts of BEP and discuss why there is still a glass ceiling.
And you know what? So number one, that's our lovely co-host, the legendary Les Frye. All right. And I'm also here with our amazing executive producer, Adrian Alvarado, who we call Double A. And again, I'm your host, Tony Tidbit. And we're excited to come back and meet with you again and give you a little bit more about who we are. And more importantly, we want to start diving into some of the content and some of the things that we really put this podcast together about. It's why is there still a glass ceiling in corporate America in 2023? So like I said, we're excited to dive into this. You're going to learn more about myself, the legendary Les Frye and the amazing Double A. But before we get started, a couple things I really want to talk to you guys about. You know, in our last episode, you learned the reason why we started this. We are very passionate about this content. We're very passionate about what we're trying to do. We want to be able, our goal is to bring everyone together. Well, hopefully we can all be one race, the human race. And for us to do that, we're going to need to be able to scale this podcast out to reach as many people as possible so we can touch those individuals and help educate those individuals. And the only way we're going to be able to do that, we're going to need your help, all right, to be able to scale this is by going to wherever you see this podcast and providing us a rating, because that's going to help us scale. So really need your help there. Number two, come to our website at blackexecutiveperspective.com, sign up for updates. This will allow you to be able to get an update when we're launching a new episode. You'll get a newsletter in terms of the content we're putting together. And soon we're going to be doing bonus content on all different type of things which you don't want to miss. So definitely go to our website, www.blackexecutiveperspective.com, and sign up and follow us on social, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube at Tony Tidbit BEP. So meet Tony Tidbit and friends, and why is there a glass ceiling? So the legendary Les Frye, as she spoke in our first episode, and listen, I'll be honest with you, I heard a lot of good things. Everybody loved Les. So one of the things about Les, she talked a little bit about, her background in terms of where she was from in St. Louis. And then she spoke a little bit about her European background. So I'd love for her to dive in and tell us a little bit more about the full Les Frye.
All right. Well, I think that at this age in my life, I decided that I would embrace all of who I am, because I don't feel that it is a tribute to our ancestors if we don't remember them. So many of us who identify or have lived the Black experience here in the United States, we identify as being Black or African American, whatever you want to call yourself, but then we negate everyone else that came before us that made us who we are today. And one thing that's very important to me is my indigenous heritage. So I have indigeneity on both sides of my family. I just recently got involved with our community and embraced that community. But what it was that actually made me pursue that side of my family was when my mother passed away, I found myself being in the position of being the oldest matriarch of our family, of the Henderson family.
Mm-hmm.
So it was important for me to go in and find out who we were, who our people were. As a result of me looking and searching my DNA records, paperwork that we had within the family, I found other family members. And incidentally, we were all interestingly enough, we were all searching for this one indigenous woman, and her name was Julia. And Julia was very significant in the survival of my great-great-grandfather, in which this family all comes from. So I felt really compelled to find her, because I thought to myself, if I ever met that woman in the next life, she would ask me, why did we forget her? So it was important for me to look for her, to find her people, to find the rest of our family, and embrace that side of ourselves that we weren't allowed to show, our indigenous side. We could go into a lot of detail in the future about our U.S. Census, how a lot of us have been misidentified and misclassified. But I felt it's important that I embrace everybody in my family. My family is not the result of a situation where most African Americans find themselves in, where we would have a master, we were given a last name by our master, or there might have been some type of SA, and I'm not going to say that word, that occurred that was the result of it, of being a child. The relationships in my family were love relationships. So I feel like I owe it to my Irish grandmother and my indigenous grandmother to remember them and make sure that all of my nieces and nephews after that remember them too.
That is awesome. And, it's very important, and we're going to talk a little bit about our DNA makeup. You just spoke a little bit about yours. And until recently, a lot of us didn't know our full, makeup. You were blessed enough to be able to understand at a young age in terms of your full family history. But a lot of African Americans don't know, right? Until we're able to, the technology came out. And now we have a better understanding that, a lot of us, even though we're dark skinned or whatever the case may be, our blood or our ancestry may not just be African. Okay. And it may not be African at all. Okay. It can be all over. And so really appreciate you sharing that. And we're going to dive into that even further. But last week you spoke, our audience was able to learn a little bit about yours truly, myself, Tony Tidbit, and the legendary Les Frye. But a lot of people really didn't get to spend a lot of time with the person that, puts the tech together and make sure the shot is done and make sure that, we're looking as handsome and beautiful that we're supposed to look on this show. And that's our executive producer, the amazing double A, Adrian Alvarado. So we want you guys to be able to spend some time and get to know Adrian, because he has a wealth of history and background. So double A, introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about you, my friend.
Well, thank you very much, first of all. And stop it. Okay, just stop it.
Buddy, I'm trying to use up the $20 you gave me before we started the podcast. That's all I'm doing.
I'm glad I greased you. Well, no, thank you. Well, I was born. Well, first of all, we met here. We live in the same town. That's how we started getting to know each other and our families. And then, somehow this podcast started to grow, and now it's a reality. It's a living, breathing thing. But a little bit about where I'm from. I was born in the heart of New Jersey, downtown Jersey City. First generation Puerto Rican. My parents and my grandparents came here in the 50s. After the war, going back and forth, there's a whole assimilation that a lot of us Puerto Ricans went through. My journey has led me to become an actor, an author, and now a producer alongside you in this exciting podcast. And my formative years were, unfolded in the vibrant urban landscape of the 80s and 90s in Jersey City, New Jersey, which is, you can just categorize it as a multicultural, just freaking melting pot of people. So I grew up with with the whole spectrum of Italians, Polish, Irish, Black, Asians, Egyptians. So my background is very, very multicultural and vast.
So, buddy, number one, thank you for that. And last week, Les and I talked about our turning point in terms of when we first, as young children, when race was first put upon us as young children, and that, kind of woke us up the understanding of what we would be dealing with the rest of our lives. So we'd love to pose that question to you too. Growing up in New Jersey, tell us a little bit, what was your turning point when it came to race?
Yeah, my pivotal turning point was when that began my journey into a deeper understanding of race relations and self-identity. It happened when I was working at a pizzeria as a kid. I was about 13, 14 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And, I just vividly recall, I was like folding boxes, I would just run errands and do stuff. I'm folding boxes, I'm watching TV. This was the music video era. And I was humming this song, but it was an 80s song by this singer called Rick Derringer.
Rick Derringer.
Yeah.
Huh? Do you know Rick Derringer, Les?
The great
Yes,
Rick
I
Derringer.
do.
Les, no, okay.
That's my era.
Yes. Yes. So he had a song called I Am a Real American, right? And in the video, the great legendary Hulk Hogan, the wrestler Hulk Hogan, was like playing the rock guitar in it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And he's like, damn a real American, something like that. And then we had a delivery guy, this Italian kid. He was about 18, 19. And he approaches me. He's like, hey, Chino, you're not a real American. You're a Puerto Rican, right?
Wow.
Yeah. So, I was like, it kind of struck me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, yeah, I know I'm Puerto Rican, but what do you mean I'm not a real American, I was born here. I pledge allegiance every day. I don't know. I know my history. What are you talking about? So it sort of struck me. And I mean, in that moment, I was such a kid. I didn't know what he meant. It kind of pissed me off.
Right.
But as I got older and I started thinking about that, he was right to a degree. But that's what began my journey to discovering, okay, who am I? Why is he saying I'm not a real American? Oh, because maybe the rest of the world, well, when I say, hey, I'm from America, they'll go, no, but where you're from?
Mm-hmm.
Because maybe I guess the typical American doesn't look like me, which is, untrue. But that's kind of what began my journey,
Wow, buddy. Wow. And so when you were saying that he probably was right, like what do you mean by that?
Well, I didn't understand it at the time,
Mm-hmm.
but, as I started studying about what being Puerto Rican meant, I was raised in a single home, most of my life with the Spanish speaking. My mother spoke Spanish. My dad's first language is Spanish. So when they spoke English, they speak with a very thick accent,
Mm-hmm.
so that's not what your typical American sounds like. So I know what he means. I know I come from Puerto Rico, but I know Puerto Rico is part of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this whole history and whatever. But I'm like, okay, well, what does he really mean?
Mm-hmm.
He meant that, that I'm not a white American,
Right.
pretty much,
Right.
but
Right.
just
Right.
call
Right.
it what it is.
Right.
He said, well, you don't have the look, blonde, blue eyes, or your typical, next door neighbor, you're not an American, red-blooded American.
So you couldn't sing the song.
So I couldn't say I'm a real American.
Right. That's what the song was, right?
What the hell? What do you mean?
Okay, buddy. And so let me ask you this. Yes, we met. Where our families know each other. Our kids go to school together. Why did you invest the time to come here and really work on this podcast?
Well, ultimately, my life, my career is always about giving back, right? Just always, whether I'm, helping the next fellow actor along the way, giving advice, I've been in the hospitality industry, whether it's training the next person up, giving whatever little tricks I learn. Like it's always about, just sort of wanting to help. So I feel like we needed to, I wanted to do something,
Mhm.
and when you mentioned this podcast, I remember when you started this conversation, I was like, I'm all about it because I have, we have similar backgrounds per se, we have different, we're different generation. Yeah, you're a different generation, right?
Mhm.
But we share similar views.
Dude said, "I'm different. You're a different generation.
Which
That
means
means you old.
means you older than me.
That's all. He said it very politely, though. I like the way I like his verbiage in terms of we're a different generation, but we have a lot of things in common,
We have a lot of
right?
things in common. But I was just compelled to just be a part of it, share, magnify your voice because I feel the work that you do, the way you're passionate about it, is just very unique and real and honest, and I just want to be a part of it.
Awesome. But well, look, I know I can speak for Les, but we're excited that you're here, my friend, because I don't want to sound like Tom Cruise, but you complete us. Okay. You complete us, right? We can't do this without you. Okay. So you're awesome. We love you and we're glad you're here.
Thank you.
So let me ask you this though. Les kind of spoke a little bit about this earlier when she gave homage to her indigenous grandmother and her European grandmother, right? The total makeup of who she is. You talked a little bit about being, from Puerto Rico. Do you know your DNA? Are you a 100% Puerto Rican? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, theoretically, I'm 100.
Les is laughing. What are you laughing at?
I'm like, theoretically, I'm.
There's no 100% of any.
I didn't think so, but you
I was
never
about
know.
To school. I was about to school.
School me.
Well, I am 100% Boricua, as we say, theoretically. But when you translate Puerto Rico, I mean, when you really think about it, it means rich port. So, we are made up. I did do my DNA. I couldn't wait to do it, especially after, that when we go back to my conversation about my turning point, it led to me really wanting to know who a Puerto Rican is, because I just knew I was from this island, and we love music and salsa, and we cook really good, and and all the women are really pretty and all this stuff, and the guys look pretty good too.
Oh my God!
But I knew it was deeper than that,
right?
So obviously the history of Spain, so it starts there. So yeah, I am 50% Spanish, and then it starts to break down into 15%. It goes into 15% West African from Senegal, which is my grandmother's side. My grandmother, was brown skin. She was an Afro Latina. And then we get into some, native here from Northeast Caribbean, like the Northeast, about 15% of that. And then you actually have some, just European, mix of, Jewish, Italian, a little German. So I'm all over the place. I'm a rich port.
Well, I love it, buddy. And you based on what you just got finished saying is what we talked about in the beginning of our episodes when we come on, right? We want to, the goal is to make this about the human race, right? And you just encapsulated that, right?
Yep.
And Les talked a little bit about that as well. Les, when you were talking about, your indigenous heritage, right? We have I believe October 9th is an indigenous heritage day. Can you speak a little bit about that? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a fairly new holiday, actually, where we recognize indigenous people. Now, we do have Indigenous Heritage Month or Native American Heritage Month that comes up in November. But this is a day where we remember the contributions of indigenous people worldwide. And it's just not here in America. And, ironically enough, indigenous people, just like Black people here, African people have contributed to the wealth, success of every European society. So this is a day that you go and you recognize these people. You speak about our issues. You highlight the issues within the community. Every year I go to Washington, D.C. Well, actually, I shouldn't say every year, because last year was my first time doing it, where I go to Washington, D.C. and we do a remembrance ceremony for all of the people who came before us. So we are actually going to be doing a podcast.
Yes, we are.
Today, to give a little bit of a history about Indigenous Peoples Day, what it is, how you can celebrate it, how you can support other Indigenous communities out there. So I'm looking forward to that.
Well, listen, you did that when we've known each other now 4 years, and you did that on one of my conversation on race sessions. I think the first year that we put it together, right? And you blew everybody away, including yours truly. So our audience, you do not want to miss that on October 9th. The legendary Les Frye is going to talk about, she breaks it down. So if you want to learn and you want to educate yourself, all right, and really know about indigenous people, the day, the history, the misnomers, the myths, the whole 9 yards, the legendary Les Frye is going to educate you. So definitely October 9th, come and join us and you'll be able to talk about it. Right. And, so number one, thank you for that. Number two, when I think it was a few years ago, my daughters bought me, is it You and Me? What is 23andMe? Thank you. 23andMe. DNA. As I said, You and Me. I'm singing songs and stuff.
and me.
Wait, come on.
Is it you and me? It was them, then me.
Yeah, you and me, right? Yeah, you and me, baby. So 23 and me, right? And I got my results. I did it and I got my results. And listen, I'm no different. However, I had a high percentage. I think it was 72% of from North Africa. Okay. But the other key was I was 15% Irish. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's a history behind that.
Tell us, talk to me. I want to hear that.
But what's interesting about your Irish heritage is that a lot of people here in the United States that identify as Black or have lived the Black experience have Irish heritage. And why is that? Because the Irish and the Italians, when they came here as free people, let's talk about the Irish in particular.
Mm-hmm.
In my family, they came here during the potato famine, which was a time of great poverty in Ireland. So a lot of people migrated to the United States to try to make it for themselves. When they came here, they were extremely impoverished, and they basically intermingled with our African American community, worked on, building things together. They were craftsmen. They were a community. There was no white and Black. It was more about a socioeconomic status.
Right.
So you saw a lot of intermarrying that happened between those people that came here from Ireland and Black people, which I'm the product of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead and us.
No, but this is the point I was trying to make. It did not become a white and Black issue until later. As I've said before, race is a new construct. That is something that did not happen before the 1600s.
Mm-hmm.
So it was all about the haves and the have-nots. So people intermingled often. I remember seeing an old newspaper clipping where they had people coming from Germany that were selling themselves into indenturitude for like 7 years.
7 years.
And they called them slaves.
Mm-hmm.
German people, they were slaves. They worked for 7 years. They were, blacksmiths or whatever. They just did a service for a master for 7 years, and then they were able to go out and have their own businesses and stuff. So what we know as white, Black, Hispanic, all of that stuff is new stuff, you all.
And we're going to dive into that because that is very important to understand. So this is going to be one of our episodes further down the line where we're going to talk about where did color come from, because to the legendary Les Frye, it didn't start off that way. So thank you for that. And I appreciate the history from the Irish standpoint. But yeah, that was very, it was, I don't want to say it was eye opening. I mean, you don't have to be, once the DNA stuff started coming out and everybody started getting tested, for the majority, all of us, we're all mixed up one way or the other. So it was very educational and it was awesome. And you're starting to laugh though, right, buddy?
I don't want to interject, but I had a funny story.
Go ahead, buddy.
I had a buddy of mine, an actor friend who would always say, he was a third Portuguese. He's from Northern California. And he said, "Oh yeah, I'm a quarter Portuguese." He would wear that badge all the time. And then when the DNA came out, he was like 99% basically like WASP. He's like, I couldn't be any more white. Buddy. He was so upset, actually. He was so mad.
Listen, that happened to me because my mother and everybody was saying, Tony, you have Indian blood in you. Blah, blah, blah. You're indigenous. And then it was 70-something% North African and 15%, Ireland, right? So, that's why you can say whatever, all right, until you get the test. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Les.
The test is not a positive, what I would say a complete science, because remember, you get chromosomes for each of your parents. So you may have indigenous blood. Your friend might have Portuguese heritage. The thing is that you didn't inherit those chromosomes. So the best way for you to find out the truth is to go back into family records and census reports and stuff like that.
Wow, good stuff. Really? Okay.
Interesting. There you go.
I probably went through
there
my
you go,
mother's
Tom.
side.
Now
right?
you know, Tom. You can go figure it out if you're listening.
Exactly. So, real quick, obviously we want to make sure that our audience, you guys, we've all been given our background. We talked about our turning points, where we come from, Detroit, Michigan, Jersey City, St. Louis. We talked about our DNA, but let's have some little fun before we get a little bit more serious. Because obviously we do a lot of stuff, and we're like everybody else. We like to watch stuff and do stuff, and have different type of hobbies. So let's share with our audience. Who wants to start off first? Double A, you want to kick it off?
Yeah. Okay, Les, I have a question for you. So, what is your favorite? Well, I was going to ask you this at first, but then when I find out you were a gamer, I'm like, what is your favorite video game?
I have to say my all-time favorite replayable video game is Mass Effect. Mass Effect 1 and 2 being my most favorite. Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3. I love that game so much. I think what I loved about it is that you could create the main character to look just like you. They banned this game in China because you can play as a male or a female. And there's a species in this game because this is about intergalactic travel and a commander that's fighting off this alien force. There's a species in this particular storyline that is what's what I would say. They don't have they're male or female. I can't explain it. They look completely female.
Okay.
But they're male or female. And the reason why they banned it in China, because if you were playing as a female, it kind of appeared as if it was a same-sex relationship. This was communistic China. Eventually, the game did come back on the market and stuff, and they allow people to play it. But because I played as a female, there's a sequence in there where there's this love relationship between this alien and your character. So I always tell everybody it was my first lesbian relationship because, I screamed through the whole thing. I was like, oh my God. But just to understand, the game is so good. It's so good that I actually picked this game up 2 weeks ago and played it again. And it is graphically just gorgeous. Just a complete package of a game.
Wow. Okay.
It's my favorite game.
Interesting.
Cool. Cool.
All right, Les, who you wanna pick on here?
All right. Well, I gotta ask Double A something else since he asked me. So Double A, if you had to pick a particular actor that you thought says it all, does it all, is the best all, who would that actor be?
That's a good one.
That's a good question because, we have our heroes, Marlon Brando and John Leguizamo and people who are very versatile. But I would say overall, talent-wise, currently the person I've seen acting over the last 30 years would be Christian Bale.
Now, why Christian Bale?
I think he's talk about versatility. I think he's done it all. I would say as far as talent wise, male, he's with Christian Bale. Female actress side, I would say Kate Blanchett is one of my current favorite actresses.
Okay. Yeah. Why Kate Blanchett?
I think she's just so classic. I don't know. This is something about her and the way she just approaches her craft. She has a saying that I always comes to my head when I get prepared to do something. And when I heard her say it in an interview, it just always stuck with me. It says, "I'm here, I'm ready, and I'm open." And I always try to remind myself whenever I'm doing a job or getting ready to perform or try out for something. I'm here and I'm ready and I'm open for whatever happens.
Okay, cool, buddy. That's awesome.
Yeah, so I think those are great actors. All right, Tony. What's your favorite movie, Tony, and why?
So yeah, anybody who knows me knows this is The Godfather. I'm a big Godfather fan. I just love the whole thing about The Godfather. The family aspect, the business aspect. It's just more real world in terms of all things that people deal with, right? And even the moral aspect, right? Where your compass says I'm doing what I need to do to protect my family, right? And you believe in God and you take your kids to get baptized, but then you're murdering people at the same time. Right? And so to me, And that's, and I remember and obviously there's a lot of great dialogue in the movie. So I'll tell you one, but there's a ton of stuff I can go to. But one line epitomizes what I was just finished talking to. Godfather 2, right, where the senator who says that he plays that Italian people are great, and then behind the scenes he's telling Michael, we don't want your people here, and blah 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 blah, and don't ever talk to me again. Go through my middleman. And then how does he say it? He says, and how do you parade and put on this big false narrative about your whole, and I'm just going to say whole family, right? And Michael looks at him and says, Senator, you and I are of the same, I forget the word that he used, but he says, you and I are of the same something. But he was basically saying that, buddy, you're doing the exact same thing. Right? The exact same thing. And you're a senator, right? So it really just, that's why it's a favorite movie of mine. And now I remember the word. He said, Senator, you and I are of the same hypocrisy. That's what he was saying, right? I loved it because it's factual. So, that's my favorite, buddy. I want to dive in a little bit because obviously, everybody, this podcast is, Tony Tidbit. People call me Tony Tidbit. Our social handles are Tony Tidbit, BEP. So people may say, oh, why do you call yourself Tony Tidbit? Where did that come from? So I just want to give a little background on that because, that's also, all these little things add up and they all come together. And back in 2000, and I think it was 2008, that's where the Tony Tidbit, brand started. Okay. And from there to where we are now is just amazing. And I never saw that. But back in 2008, I was working for a startup. I was, as you guys know, I'm in the advertising industry. I was working at this startup. I was employee number 42. By the time I got there, we were, probably a $10-12 million company in terms of revenue. And then, by the time I left 5.5, almost 6 years later, we were about $150 million in revenue. But the name Tony Tidbit started back in 2009. So, one of the things, I've always been a positive and inspirational individual, very optimistic. It's just who I am. I was born that way. And, when some of you in the audience may notice, because you've worked at startups, startups are tough, right? And you got, you're trying to build something, you're trying to build a brand, you're trying to get everybody on the street to notice you. You don't have the resources. You learn how to tell the story of the business and what the business is going to bring to the table. But in actuality, it's a story. Okay. At the end of the day, we don't have all those resources. You're using paper clips to put stuff together and all that type stuff. So we were going through a tough little patch. Some of our things wasn't working. Our employees, including myself, we started to become a little negative, and you can't have that. Because at the end of the day, for the business to thrive, is not as much about the products and the technology. It's really about the passion of the individuals. If you don't have that, you're not going to have a business, and you're not going to grow a business. So we were going through a little tough patch. And, like I said, I've always been an inspirational person. So one day I went to the CEO and I said, hey, look, I want to send out just a quick little message to the entire company. Right. So I came up with this little motivational quote and I sent it out to everybody. And then the feedback, everybody was like, this is awesome. Thank you, Tony, blah, blah, blah. And then, so I was just going to do that just that one time. Right. And then my CEO, he was like, Tony, that was great. Really appreciate you doing that. So because he gave me, positive reinforcement, I was like, maybe I'll do this once a week. So I think the next week I did it, but I added a couple of my friends on the distribution list, and it was just to the company. And I added a couple people. Right. And then, so I went to lunch. I had sent it out. I went to lunch and I came back. And I saw my light on my desk, my voicemail light, right? And I picked up the phone. It was one of my friends saying, I didn't get my tidbit today. And I started laughing. Then I heard the next message. The next message says, where's my tidbit? Because I had named it. I said Tony Tidbit. I just said, here's a tidbit, Tony, right? And from that day, Tony Tidbit was born, right? And so I started sending out these motivational, inspirational quotes, emails on a daily basis at 6 o'clock in the morning. And then my team, as we went out and met with clients, they would tell people about it. And people would say, can you add me to the distribution list? Can you add me? Blah, 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 blah. And then eventually it just started growing. Okay. And then next thing I know, I had this distribution list and I was sending these emails out Monday through Friday at 6:15 in the morning, and people all over were getting them. And it was exciting. And I was like, wow, because you never know. But this was the key. I'll tell you this story real quick. This one I knew it kind of took off. I went to this event, and me and a couple of people from my job, and we were there, and we saw these two ladies standing on the other side, and they were looking at me. And I was like, they checking you out? I was like, for real? And then they sheepishly came over and they looked at me and said, excuse me, are you Tony Tidbit? And I started laughing. I was like, yeah. They're like, oh, we get your tidbits every morning. Blah, 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 blah. I fell out laughing. So that's how the name Tony Tidbit started. And those emails, those inspirational quotes still go out on a daily basis. It's been 15 years now. I still do it. I'm going to be doing it here. Every episode, you're going to get a Tony Tidbit motivational quote that's going to encapsulate what we talked about today. So I just wanted to share that with you, where the name Tony Tidbit comes. So legendary Les Frye, the amazing double A. You guys ready to dive into it a little bit further and talk about it?
Oh, I'm ready.
All right, let's talk about it, guys. So what are we going to talk about, Les? What's the title here that we want to focus on?
Why is there still a glass ceiling?
Which, to be honest, in 2023 makes no sense. Okay. I mean, we've from a human technology standpoint, we have become so advanced. Okay. But still, African Americans, people of color still struggle in terms of advancement in corporate America. So we're going to dive into that a little bit. And we're not going to dive in it just based on our opinions. Okay. We're going to use a company. And I don't know if you ever heard this company. It's called Cokewill. You ever heard the word equal? It's called Cokewill. Okay. Check them out. Go to their website. Plus, we're going to put this research on our website so you can check it out. So let me tell you a little bit about Coco. Okay. It says who we are. We are champions of equity, researchers of culture, and creators of community who empower companies to create diverse and inclusive workplaces where every person belongs. Cokewill is a global nonprofit think tank and advisory group that was founded in 2004 to address bias and uncover barriers to advancement for the unrepresented populations in the workplace. We produce research that is unique in depth, breadth, and rigor, tackling urgent workplace issues related to gender, race, ethnicity, disability, and LGBTQ identities. We offer concrete and actionable solutions, and that's the key. Our unique community, the Cokewill Task Force, is made up more of 100 member companies. These executives and practitioners are leaders in the diversity and inclusion movement. We provide them with the latest findings, events, educational opportunities, inspiration, and mutual connections. Our Cokewill Advisory Group provides consulting services that include cultural audits, sponsorship programs, anti-racism initiatives, and leadership development programs to help companies accelerate equity from workplaces to the world. So we're going to dive into some research that they put together. And this research, the sponsor of this research is the Interpublic Group, Johnson & Johnson, KPMG, Morgan Stanley, Pfizer, Unilever, and the Walt Disney Company. And the research is being Black in corporate America. So if you're watching the video, you can see a little example of this. So all three of us are going to walk through some of the findings here that these companies sponsored Cokewill to go ahead and put in the research and the equity and the time frame to really dive in and provide real metrics, not excuses, not people just saying, oh, this is messed up, real findings and real research about being Black in corporate America. Question. And let's just dive in really quick to some of the findings, right? So here in part one, And I love, they break down the representation of Black adults in the U.S. in terms of people who are what we call executive senior leaders or above. So right now, Fortune 500 CEOs, there are, from a representation of Black adults, 0.8%. Executive senior level officials and managers, 3.2%. Professionals, Black professionals, 8%. College degree holders, 10%. Now, here's the kicker. The population of African Americans here in the United States is 13%. Okay? 13%. Based on these numbers, what this is saying, that the number of CEOs in the United States at a Fortune 500 company is 0.8%. The number of people of color, Black people, who are executive senior level officials and managers is 3.2%. Again, 13% to 0.8, right? 13% to 3.2% in executive senior level official and managers. Okay. So and here's a quote by Michael C. Bush, who's the CEO of Great Place to Work. And he says, Black people lost ground when of color became the popular thing to say. Okay. And so when he says when of color became the popular thing to say, what is he saying, Les?
So I'm thinking that it's basically that we have to fit a quota of color. I'm believing that that's what it is, that when color became an issue and when color became the reason why we're hired or the reason why we're not hired. But if I heard that phrase for the first time, I would be kind of offended by that phrase. Like, why is that the case? But unfortunately, we live in a society that color is one of the most compelling things about our society here. It's the one thing that holds us back. It's the one thing that, causes us to be at a disadvantage. So I'm very interested in that. I mean, what do you think that means?
So I think it means is that before it was about Black people. Then when they said we need to hire people of color,
yeah.
That means anybody outside of being Black. All right. So if we hire somebody that's Asian, we hire somebody that's Hispanic, we hire somebody, you understand, who's Mexican, whatever the case may be, they're of color. So then that checks that box that we have people of color versus we have Black people. Okay. And you got to recognize too, back in the civil rights era where the civil rights legislation was written, okay, those were Black people that was pushing for equal rights and for, protections under the law, right? And for equal opportunities at different companies and to get jobs and stuff to that nature, right? So it was specific to African Americans. However, then the nomenclature changed to of color. Does that make sense? So now as long as we get certain groups of color involved, then we're doing what everybody expects us to do. That's my thought. And again, I'm not an expert, but that's my opinion.
But our fight for equity here in the United States was for people of color. It was never one that was just relegated to us as Black people. What has happened is that the society in which we fall under, the white society, has manipulated that nomenclature and changed it to that. We've always fought for the disadvantage. I mean, we've been fighting even during the Jim Crow era, and even when we weren't really fighting for equal rights as Black people, we were fighting for people in internment camps, Japanese people in internment camps. It was Black people who wrote those letters and got those people out of there. So the thing is that we've always been a force. The problem is, and we've always included everybody else that's disadvantaged. And this also means anybody from the LGBTQ community. It was always somebody of color who fought for that. It's how the society that is the wealthy society, the business owners, have manipulated that language.
And so this is the thing, and I'm not going to disagree with you here. My only thing I will say is that at the end of the day, when they were showing, fire hoses that was being sprayed water on, those wasn't people of color, those black people. Okay. When they were showing images of people being lynched, okay, with white people standing around looking like they're at a regular barbecue, that wasn't people of color. That was black people. Okay. When Thurgood Marshall went to, to the Supreme Court, okay, to break up desegregation in terms of schools, there wasn't no desegregation for, anybody else but black people. Okay. So at the end of the day, I hear you. I hear you. And that's the point. The bottom line is other people are benefited from, and rightfully so. It's not, everything should be equal. But I'm just being honest based on all the things that's gone on. When you look at these numbers, and we're gonna have enough time to dive in deeper, but we will. If you see the percentage of Asian CEOs, it's a lot higher. Okay. It's way higher than 0.8. Okay. And we can go into it, and women in the whole nine yards. So that's my take when it comes to that.
I say that we are an inclusive society. We have always been. Black people have never had a problem with color. It's always been the society in which we lived in. And the thing is that when Martin Luther King was marching on Washington, D.C., if you think about his speeches, it was about anybody that was disadvantaged. And that means indigenous, that means black, that meant Mexican people that were working and being indigenous. It meant Japanese people in internment camps. So this is what I'm saying. The manipulation has not, I agree that what we saw in society at the time was happening to Black people in America. When we went on that march for our civil rights, we were putting everybody that was disadvantaged there. We're on the same page when it comes to that. I'm just saying who benefited of it, who benefit from it, right? And that's where Michael Bush here is saying, and I'll read his quote again, Black people lost ground when of color became the popular thing to say. So yeah, you're 100% right. We were fighting for everybody, right? At the end of the day, and guess what? We've seen advancements, right? But these numbers, based on our percentage of the population, based on the number of college grads, okay? At the end of the day, these numbers are abysmal. And here's the kicker. They've always been abysmal, and they haven't increased any further, where, to be fair, and we'll dive into other, because we're going to get into it, but tell us the next part. Tell us about what do you find here, Les? So the interesting thing is that, I've often heard that terminology. Well, the reason why Black people don't succeed is because they don't want to work.
Right.
That's not true. But according to these statistics here, it says Black professionals are more likely than white professionals to be ambitious. The problem is we're ambitious, but we're not given the advantages. So overall, Black people are 65% more likely to be ambitious as opposed to white people, which is 53%. And with men, 67% of Black men are more ambitious than white men, which is at 55%. And 63% of Black women are more ambitious than compared to their white counterpart, which is 51%.
So again, take the misnomer out that, they really don't want to work. They're not that ambitious. Well, Coke will saying flat out, that's not the case here, right? Based on their research and whether they looked at, right? And so at the end of the day, when we dive into this, and we're going to do another episode, so you don't want to miss it, because we're going to go deeper into these numbers, okay? And we want to get your questions and get your thoughts in terms of these numbers. But the last thing that I'm going to dive into, okay, is that here it says Black professionals see barriers to advancement that are largely invisible to white professionals. Okay. So at the end of the day, and the number says, while nearly 2/3 of Black professionals agree that they have to work harder than their colleagues to advance in their careers, very few white professionals see it that way. Most white professionals just aren't educated about or aware of this reality. Okay. Now listen, like I said, we're running short on time, but I can tell you this, and we can spend, you and I and Double A can spend a whole hour just on this portion right here. Okay. But at the end of the day, I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. You grew up in St. Louis. Double A grew up in New Jersey. Double A is in the entertainment field. So is you, but you're also in the media field. I'm in the media field. Okay. Three of us grew up totally different. We're in different industries. I've met people all over. And guess what? I hear the same thing from everybody that I meet all over, no matter where they're from, the exact same thing. So these aren't things that's being made up. These are things that is real. And more importantly, Coquel in their research is breaking it down. So we're going to come back, Les and Double A, and we're going to dive into this deeper, right? Because we want to share this with our audience. And we want to, more importantly, we want everybody to be aware of these things, right? Not based on opinion, but based on fact, based on education. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode, Tony Tidbit and Friends, and Why Is There a Glass Ceiling, with my co-host, the legendary Les Frye, and our amazing producer, Adrian Alvarado, who we call Double A. So now it's time for, as I talked about earlier, that we're going to be doing on every episode, Tony's Tidbit. And today's tidbit is, a choir is made up of many voices, including yours and mine. If one by one all go silent, then all that will be left are nothing but soloists. Don't let a loud few determine the nature of the sound. It makes for poor harmony and diminishes that song. And that's by Vera Nazarene, right? And so today, hopefully you enjoyed this song. You can see the three of us, we're not being quiet, all right? We're singing. We're going to keep singing. Our voices are not going to be silent, right? So thanks for joining us. As I spoke earlier today, we want to scale this. As the tidbit says, we want a huge choir. We want everybody singing. We want to hear from everyone. So for that to happen, please go wherever you're watching this podcast, give us a rating so we can be able to scale this. Come to our website at blackexecutiveperspective.com and sign up for updates so you'll be able to know when our new podcast episodes are being released, and other bonus information, as well as our newsletter that'll be coming out soon, right? Follow us on social, Instagram, Twitter, which is X, and LinkedIn.
Subscribe.
subscribe. LinkedIn, YouTube at Tony Tidbit BEP. Again, for my host, who could not be possible, legendary Les Frye, Double A. I'm Tony Tidbit. Come back and join us, and let's talk about it. We're out.
A Black Executive Perspective.
Look, man, they didn't get a chance to play chess. They had to play checkers.
Let's talk about it, T.
Openly and honestly. There was a lot of smart kids there.
A Black Executive Perspective.
Now, my story's not unique. There's thousands of professionals of color who have experiences like mine.
A Black Executive Perspective.
Whether you're aware of it or not, it's a topic that is often avoided.
We'll discuss race and how it plays a factor, and how we didn't even talk about this topic because we were afraid.
A Black Executive Perspective. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Tony Tidbit, A Black Executive Perspective, and for joining in today's conversation. With every story we share, every conversation we foster, and every barrier we address, we can ignite the sparks that bring about lasting change. And this carries us one step closer to transforming the face of corporate America. If today's episode resonated with you, consider subscribing and leaving us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Share this episode with your circle, and with your support, we can reach more people and tell more stories.